Hi, welcome today. My name is Dr. Angie Giordano. I teach in the Department of Family Consumer Sciences here at Cal State Northridge in the area of family studies. So typically I teach classes on marriage and family, family theories, family stress and coping. But today I'm going to be talking about things that happen with parents and changes that happen with families when we bring a new baby into the environment. So what we're going to cover today is we are going to talk about becoming a parent, the adjustment that takes place with mothers and fathers, and the attachment and bonding that should take place with parents and their newborns, the emotional, physical adjustments, any support systems that moms have, we'll talk about those, family planning techniques so that we can decide to or decide not to expand our families. Things that happen, considerations to think about with the siblings in the family when you bring a new baby into the home. Sleeping choices that parents can decide upon. And then I'm going to be sharing 3 family theories that I think are pretty important to talk about that will illustrate some of the ideas and principles that we're going to talk about in here today with this particular topic. I should also say, too, that I've been teaching at CSUN for 17 years now. And this is the first time, and I've taught different classes, different formats. This is the first time I'm teaching a class fully online to actually a classroom with no students. So you guys at home on your computers are my students. So this is a new format for me. So bear with me. We'll see how this one goes. My typical teaching style is very interactive with students in the class. So this is new. I'm going to be teaching as if you guys are sitting right here in the class with me. So I have a few parts in the lecture. Well, I will have you guys pause at home on the computer, have some paper and pencil there handy, and I'll ask a question. I'll ask you to pause your computer for 10, 15 minutes, do some brainstorming, thinking, scribble down some ideas, and then we'll resume class as if you were in here doing an in-class activity and resume lecture talking about some of the things you could have come up with. So we'll have some in-class activities that you'll be doing at home, so make sure you fumble around and get some paper at that time. I have a few videos that we'll show that you can watch on the large screen or on your computer screen at home, and we'll watch those together and talk about them after. And then, like I always do with all my classes, not only have I been teaching for a while, but this particular content is new and personal to me because I have 2 little ones at home. My daughter, Lila Jean, who we call her LJ, she turned 2 months ago, and my son, Zane, just turned 4 last week. So I have kids at home. I've experienced this recently. I breastfed both of my children with 2 different experiences. And I have plenty of girlfriends that have gone through this too. So I'll be sharing my personal examples throughout when it's relevant to illustrate some of the principles. Okay, so the first thing I want to start us off with is one of the theories that we talk about in family studies. It's one of the original family studies theories, and a portion of the theory focuses a lot on how roles are developed, okay? So what this theory says is that role development and our sense of self, who we are, it develops based on our interpretation of others, so that we have interactions with other people, and the other people that we interact with they say things explicitly, there's nonverbal gestures and facial expressions, and based on those interactions, we get input and feedback about who we are, how we're performing in a particular role, and that information guides how we change or alter our behavior in that role in the future. So that we learn through interactions with others. The communication is both verbal and nonverbal. And it's almost as if we're actors playing a role or a character. And we'll go through some of these in just a second, so it makes a little bit more sense. Well, for example, all of you sitting here watching at home right now are probably in your most salient role of student. So we all have that in common. Not me, but you guys have that in common as a student. So at some point in your life, you would have had to learn what it means to you to be a student. So what does a student do? How does a student act? That might have started in kindergarten. You might have learned in high school what it means to be a student. It might be something very different to you now that you're in college. What does a college student do? And the information in the verbal and nonverbal interactions that you could have had with your parents said, You know, I'm paying for your education. This is what I want you to do. It could have been very explicit like that, or you could be meeting with an instructor. You could come to my office during office hours and rush in and say, hi, Angie, I'm glad to meet with you now. I'm glad you had time to meet with me. I just came from the library. I've been studying, and I have a couple questions for you. I'd be like, that's wonderful. You're at the library. I'm so glad that you're spending time studying at the library. Or you could come in for an advisement session with nothing, which some students do, with a smile on their face and say, you know, I don't know what classes to take. I might give you you probably should have brought some type of other material, advising material as your DPR, and you'll get from all of what I just gave you that you probably should have been more prepared. So in the future, when you come meet me for the second time, for your advising, you'll make sure to bring those materials with you. So learning from others and how to act in a role, for example, this one, a student, happens continuously. And what's interesting about this theory, if you think about it, all of this happens, what I'm talking about, really in our minds. It's our interpretation of what we're seeing others do and our interpretation of what that means to us and how they're impacting us. So if you really think about it in your daily life, symbolic interactionism theorists would say probably 80 to 90% of your life is experienced just in your head, so that we don't really know. Sometimes I'll be sitting in class and I'll have students sitting in different ways, and I could see some that are sitting like this looking at me, and I might think in my head, wow, they're really interested in what I'm saying. It's making me feel better. I'm going to continue doing what I do. Or I could look at them and say, gosh, they're just dazing off. They're not paying any attention to me. I feel terrible as an instructor. I might lose interest. And the outside world hasn't changed a bit, but it's my interpretation of what I'm seeing has an impact significantly on who I am, how I do things in certain roles. So it's pretty interesting. We also learn the values and rules of society through interactions with others. So there are some things that our society and our cultures, our traditions. I know we have a diverse student population at CSUN. You're from different families with different cultural expectations. That message is also given to us when we have interactions with others, so that we understand what we should and should not be doing in our roles. This last part of the theory that I want to talk about is the idea of role salience. So in a minute, I'm going to have you guys do one of the in-class activities and pull out a piece of paper and write down some of the roles that you have and how you think that you've learned what to do and behave in those roles. But we all have different roles, and I kind of like to visualize it like a pie chart. So we're all a big pie, and we might have pieces of the pie that are the different roles we have. So for me personally, I'm a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a friend, an employee, a teacher, student sometimes. So I have these different roles that make me of who I am. Right now, I will tell you that my mother role is not the biggest piece. Right now, my teacher role is. I'm in the spot where it's what I'm focusing on now and giving my most attention. So our time during the day and throughout life is divided among these different roles. The most important one is salient. And that the role and salience, they change over time. So not all of you have the roles I just mentioned, but you might develop them over time. Right now, your pie has these pieces, and they change for you, but in the next 10, 20, 30 years, which is an exercise I'll ask you to do, they're going to change over time, okay? So I want you guys now to take out a piece of paper. I'm going to put up 2 questions, have you pause the lecture at home, and spend about 10, 15 minutes thinking about this for you. So what roles have you acquired in your life, and how did you know what to do or be in a new role? You may not have ever thought about this, but when you get into a relationship, if you're not at home married with children, but in a dating relationship, being a boyfriend or a girlfriend, how did you know what to do in that role? How did you learn about that? And then the second question is, how will your role salience change over the next 10, 20 years? How will your pie chart look different? If you are consumed with 5 roles now, if in the future you don't have a student role anymore, now you have an employee role, or you move to mothering or fathering role, caregiver role, how will they change over the next 10 to 20 years? So I want you guys to take a few minutes now, think about this, write down some notes, and we'll come back as a class in just a minute and talk about it, okay? Okay, so let's go through some of the roles that you may have written down, and we'll talk about some. So the first one I think that we all also are, to some extent, in some way now, are son or daughter to families. That's an interesting one because, well, I'll give an example. As young children, I was going to say we might not know exactly what to do. However, my son, who's 4, who pushes my buttons sometimes and likes to wrestle a little bit too hard with his sister, will get wrestling with her. And I've already told him explicitly, Zane, you're the big brother, you protect her, you're not rough with her. And I'll see him in the other room, I'll hear him crying, I'll go in and I'll say, Zane, look at Mama's face. It is not happy before I have to start yelling at him. I'll try to do this. Mama's face is not happy. What's going on in here? Why am I not happy? So I'm actually really giving a good example of how I'm trying to have him read my face. So if he's doing something and looks over and I'm not happy, he's supposed to understand, I better stop this because Mom's about to come in and holler at me. So that happens at a young age, so he's 4. We might get different experiences and expectations in middle childhood, our teenage years. Some of us are young adults. Some of us might be even middle adults with elderly aging parents. And throughout the life, I think we're getting ongoing feedback about what it means to be a son or daughter at, interestingly, different ages and times in our lives. Same with sister or brother. If you do have sisters or brothers, I don't know how this could have happened, but you may have had a discussion with your sisters and brothers about what you're supposed to do. It might have happened through fighting and ridicule at the house. You know, Angie, get out of my room. I don't want you anywhere near my things. So that happens too. We get feedback about being the family members of sisters and brothers. Girlfriends or boyfriends, that's exciting and interesting. I'm at an age now where I've always really liked to people watch. And I'll be out in public watching teenagers, and you can tell, you know, the younger teenagers that are just getting into these relationships. And you can see how it's really an arena for them to practice. They come into these relationships, and they pretty much are doing probably what their parents did, what they're seeing people do on TV, what their friends are doing or have done, and then they learn what to do or not what to do in coupled or romantic relationships really early on in our teenage years. So they're pretty important roles and relationships that we have as boyfriend and girlfriend early on. We talked about student, employee would fall into the same category. What are the expectations, levels of professionalism, how to dress, when to be punctual, how to address other people. This is all information we get a lot of times just by observing how others respond to us. Friend also, husband or wife, we talked about a little bit. My now husband and I lived together and actually bought a house before we got married. So I remember coming up to the wedding, especially because I teach this material, getting close to our wedding day thinking, okay, how is this going to change now? Because right now, I'm his fiance. We kind of are living as if we're married. After we get married and I become the role of official wife, I wonder will I feel differently? How will my behaviors change? Will I do things and test things out with my husband? And we would probably need to ask my husband this question. It's hard for me to think, but I know it's happened. It's especially happened now in this next role that we've become mother and father, that we do a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication back and forth about what's expected. Who's going to give the kids a bath tonight? Who's going to make their food? All these types of things that have to happen. In the role now, me as a mother and him as a father, I've had to think about it. And I gather information on a daily basis, and that'll be the remainder of the class we'll talk about today, is, you know, how does a new mother and a new father know what in the world to do? I think we just expect people to know these roles, and we never take time to really analyze how that information and knowledge and those behaviors are developed. And I think it's an interesting question. So I want you guys to be thinking about that. Okay. So in your materials related to our class, you've probably read about the stages of role acquisition that parents go through becoming a new parent. So the anticipatory stage is going to happen usually before delivery. So pregnant women and thinking about becoming pregnant women, they're doing a lot of work and research, asking around, asking other people, you know, what should I expect to be doing in the role of mother? Now this is going to be new. So this happens before delivery, and you begin learning the new role. You're asking a lot of questions. In the formal stage, that's going to happen right after, and I remember this clearly, especially with my first one, because I didn't have any kids. I had a lot of time. I read everything. I visited all the websites, and I had all the ideas and things written down. And so then you have the formal part of it, where you are trying to do everything by the books. You want to be the best, most perfect parent that you can be. You want to do everything. You're not really sure about what you're doing, but you're following the guideline. I have an example of a girlfriend years ago. She was one of the first of my friends in my cohort to have a child. And she was actually pretty much a party girl, went out and did a lot of fun stuff, and she had her first child. And I went over when she brought her daughter home from the hospital, and on her little coffee table that used to have, cocktails laid out on it, there was a big chart, and it was columns and lines, color-coded. And I said, Robin, what in the world is that? She said, that's a chart of her daughter Lily and when she's pooping. When did she poop? What came out? What was the consistency? What was the amount? I'm thinking, wow, this is over the top. But I think it's a good example of a lot of new parents do this. We don't really know what we're doing, so we're following everything to the T because we don't want to make any mistakes. We want to be as best as we can be, as good as we can be. Then you move into the informal stage, and that's where you're relaxing the rules a little bit. The rules are, you're not following them as strongly. You're becoming less rigid in the rules. And so you're trying to figure out what's going to work for you and your family, which is going to be the final one, the personal stage. And that's where we evolve into what's comfortable, what fits with our personality. Pooping is a good one, but eating schedules with parents. You see, first-time parents and then kids and kids and kids, this idea of having a very strict schedule. For some families, that works well for them, and they'll have a strict schedule at the beginning, and they'll have it with the next 3 kids. Other families, they have a very strict schedule with the first one or with the first one for a couple of weeks or months, and then it just kind of moves into what's going to work for the family the best. So you can see the anticipatory to formal to informal to personal is kind of how we go through the process of acquiring a parental role. So then here's a good question down here to think about, is where today do we learn how to become parents? And I put in today because of this last one. We're going to watch a little link that I think what's been most dramatically a big change, say, in the last 10, 15, 20 years with parenting is that we have social media and the internet. We can Google questions, and I Googled every question you can imagine with children, and you just get a quick answer back. But traditionally, we would go to family and friends, obviously. I looked at how my mom did things. I looked at how my girlfriends were parents because I was one of the later parents. So you watch what they do. Some of the family theories say you're going to either model or compensate for what your parents did. So you'll do a lot of the things that they did that you think they did well, but the things they didn't do too well, you'll compensate for and change your behaviors. So family and friends today, we have parenting programs out there. So before having a child, after having a child, there's a lot of community programs that you can, some are free, some are not free, that you can pay for, join, where you can actually go into a classroom such as to be taught information about parenting and parenting topics. Healthcare providers, we always are going to go to our physician or our pediatrician with lots of questions. I feel sorry for the doctors that deal with first-time moms because we have so many questions. And in a second, we'll talk about our role in the healthcare system. But, the doctors are there to answer our questions, as many as we have at all times of the day and night. And then the internet and social media. I have a little thing to show us that we can watch. And it was something I found on the internet when I was pregnant that I thought was really cute and touching about things that parents could tell us before having a baby that we should keep in mind being first-time parents. I'm going to go over to the computer where this mouse is better.
So, you're going to have a baby.
You're going to have a baby.
You're gonna have a baby.
You're going to get a lot of advice.
Ignore 90% of it. It's worthless. Here's some good advice.
10 things I wish I knew before I became a parent.
Number 10.
Everything you're doing is probably the best to somebody and the worst thing that you can possibly do to somebody else. So just do what works for you and don't get on the internet, because you can Google anything and everybody has an opinion.
You'll know how to take care of them.
Do not care 1 ounce what other people think about you.
Bam.
Yeah.
Number 9.
Get on a schedule, get on a schedule, get on a schedule if you want to live.
Schedule is key to sleep. Schedule.
Number 8.
Everybody leaves this out.
So parenting is hard. Sometimes you just can't handle it.
Take just an hour, go to grandma's, drop the baby off, go get some ice cream, take a 20-minute nap.
Make a date night once a week and don't skip it.
Number 7.
This is important.
Instead of having to mold them to what you want.
Discover who they are and let them be.
Number 6.
Be prepared for the unexpected because it will happen.
Like, maybe the possibility of having twins?
There is a chance that your baby could go flying down a hill and then roll out of her car seat onto the road, which may have happened.
Number 5.
You've got to make room for the baby.
Crib, changing table, car seat, stroller, 2 strollers actually. Bassinet that went into our room, even though he had a crib in his own room. And their toys.
More crap.
He had his own room. He's 5 pounds, he has his own room, right? Like, I don't have my own room.
Number 4. You're going to look back and you're going to say, I wish those times would come back. So keep them. Don't give them all away.
They'll only wear it once, but you'll keep it forever.
Memories are the only thing that you'll have left after all is said and done.
Number 3. Be grateful for your kids. Be grateful.
Things that you aren't prepared for can turn out to be good things in the end.
Oh, yeah. Worth it. All the poop and snot and screaming and crying and fighting. Worth it. All of it. Totally worth it.
Cherish every single minute. We would never have asked for the challenge, but we were so grateful for what she taught us. We're grateful every day for her life. The best thing that ever happened to us.
Number 2.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
It's gonna be okay.
Some days you're just not going to have a lot of patience, and that's okay.
It really is all just spilled milk.
The house can wait. All of the chores can wait.
You have to remember that this is a massive change in your life. And you're going to feel every emotion there is to feel. Those deep, deep, deep emotions on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Number 1.
The one thing that you can't understand, that you can't prepare for, that you're not going to know until you experience is
All the love.
Be prepared to love something more than you ever thought you could. Because you haven't. You haven't yet.
And it will be the best thing that you've ever done in your whole life.
If I wasn't a mom, I can't imagine. It's been too wonderful.
Just relax. You're gonna be great, hopefully.
Okay. It's cute. I saw that when I was pregnant, so your emotions are going crazy. And I liked all the little rules in there. I like the dad that said, he's only 5 pounds. I don't have my own room, which is so cute. My husband and I are still trying to work on date night. That's hard to squeeze those in, but they are important. My one girlfriend at my baby shower, she gave me the best advice. She said, the internet is going to provide you with everything that you need to know and everything you don't want to know. So we go there for ideas and things, but for moms and dads getting started, you're really emotionally invested and you want to do the best you can. I remember so many times I would go on the internet and see 50 opinions of one way and 50 opinions of the other way. So the internet is good and bad. It's confusing, and it shares everything. We know that about social media. So that was another good piece of advice. Just go with your gut. Try to do what you think is best for your family, because there's going to be plenty of people out there saying what you're doing is perfect and what you're doing is horrible. Okay, so that would be my suggestion on your role with social media. What is the parent's role in the healthcare system? So the idea that I want to use here is this idea of an informed decision maker, okay? So you're going to express concerns, you're going to ask questions, and you're going to follow up with what the doctors say that you should be doing. And that sounds easy, but sometimes it isn't easy. Sometimes it's overwhelming to go in well, with your child with a lot of questions. But I remember the first time I went in to one of the appointments without my husband, and it was me there talking to the doctor, trying to listen to him, but then, my baby's crying, and I'm trying to do all this. So what I've done in the past, and it may look nerdy, and they may say, here comes this professor with her list of questions, but I have questions written down to the doctor, so I won't forget, I won't lose my train of thought when I'm in there, because the doctor's office can be a little bit overwhelming. You want to try to set the stage. Doctors are busy. You don't want to talk their ear off, but for me, the biggest piece of advice would be just to own the time you have with the doctor and make sure you get everything taken care of and all of your questions and concerns. So address. So this idea of being an informed decision maker, and then you leave the doctor's office. You can go into the doctor's office with some questions and some research. You can leave there. You can talk to different doctors. So you're going to know probably in your gut what's best for your baby and your family. Okay, so we'll talk now a little bit specifically about becoming a mom and mothers and fathers' role acquisition. As much as you can be prepared and see as many classes and do as much as you can for preparation before the baby gets there, when the baby gets there, you feel like you may not have learned one thing at all. So you're going to be uncertain about what to do. You're going to feel overwhelmed, unprepared. This is all completely normal textbook experiences. It's exactly to be expected. And it comes right off of the birth experience feeling. So a lot of times women, and I think today in 2018, there's a big build-up with what's your birth plan. Are you going to go in with the birth plan? And there's again, how you're going to get the baby out of you. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. And women have very strong feelings with how they want that experience to happen. I think especially with their first child. And so sometimes you go in and that doesn't happen exactly how you want. So you have moms that are mourning what happened. You have some moms that are still getting over that what happened did happen and what it contained, all the experiences that came out. So, and it's exhausting. I mean, it's a lot of work on our bodies. So you're physically exhausted, you're emotionally exhausted, you're exhilarated, you have a lot of emotions going on and hormones that are just naturally going on in your body after having the baby. So there's a lot of emotions that can be taking place all within the cycle of 10 seconds even. And then we come home with the baby, and these types of things happen. So loss of work experience, less contact with adults, changes in the marital relationship. An example I really like to give are there are a few events in life that are almost extraordinary, where we have them set up here culturally to almost fail. So the first one I like to give is getting married. So you start dating someone, you have all these emotions going on, you're flying high, you're so in love and happy, and then for a woman, he brings a big ring, you get a great new piece of jewelry, then you start doing the whole wedding planning, you have bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, you plan this huge big wedding event. I mean, this is a lot of fun, exciting, can't be stressful, but it's fun, stressful stuff that happens. Then you have the big wedding day, and then many of us are whisked off to 2 weeks in Fiji for our honeymoon. And then we come back home, and then the next week, Tuesday at 9 a.m. comes, and you wake up and you're like, this is kind of boring. He's still being messy around the house, and reality hits in. So I have a lot of people that talk to me in class, and they say, yeah, our relationship was great for the first 6 months, and then it just went downhill. And my response is, your relationship was make-believe for the first 6 months, and then reality hit, and now it's time to start working on it. So marriage is a big build-up, and then it kind of levels out into reality. On the other side of the spectrum, I think of a death, and that we have even, not joyous, but we have festivities, many of our cultures plan for how we handle the death of a family member. We have the funeral services, and for days or weeks after that, we have a lot of people that come help us and mourn with us and are around, but at some point during that, you're left alone with the reality of what happened. That's kind of when things get real, right? So this happens too with having a baby. You're pregnant, you're feeling wonderful, you're getting all of this love and attention, you have the baby shower, everyone comes to the hospital for the first week or two, you come home, you've got all this help, but maybe at some point everyone goes back to their lives, your spouse, if your partner is with you with the birth and in the relationship, goes back to work, and you wake up again Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., and the house is quiet, and your baby's in the other room, and you're thinking, what is going to happen today. I don't, again, really know what I'm doing. I have no nurses around, no help. Before this baby, I was out working. I would get up at 8 a.m. and I'd get dressed in my outfit and go off to work and have all these people to talk to. I'm still in my pajamas at 9, 10, 11, 3 in the afternoon. It's a shift. And so a lot of times a part of it is really exciting and wonderful, but then there's parts that don't feel normal, or they don't feel good sometimes, that we don't talk about. There's less contact with adults. There's a huge change in the marital relationship. Even we can talk and prepare for it, but we just don't know what's going to happen with the marriage. I mean, the big thing is the amount of individual and couple time you have is significantly decreased, because now you have to focus on the child. So there's huge changes that happen in the marital relationship at this time. So what can you guys who are going to be lactation consultants actually do in that situation? This is the best, and this, if I could tattoo this on some of us, have realistic expectations. This is good for marriages, any types of relationships. Have realistic expectations about what it means to be a mom, to have a baby, what breastfeeding entails, that are realistic. And that means they're not always going to be good. And I think that society doesn't give us enough room today as females and males to talk about the crummy parts. But those are emotions that we have. So as a lactation consultant, to come in who will have been working with families in this type of a situation before, to understand all of these things. And sometimes as a mom, it just feels good to say, this isn't easy, is it? And oh, it's not easy. And then just that little phrase can be helpful. So to have realistic expectations, and then you guys will have all of the, we'll talk about in just a little bit more specifics about breastfeeding, okay? And what moms can expect with that.